GM, Hot Takes Cold Wallets, episode number 28. We are packed tonight. We got Umar and Connor from ChainPatrol here tonight. GM, guys.
Hey, how's it going?
GM.
Going well over here. We also got João here from Cartesi, DevRel lead. Hey, João, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Before we dive into the episode and dive deep into the topics of DeFi, we want to get the usual ChainPatrol update, starting with you, Umar. What has been new since the last time we spoke?
Yeah, we've been pretty busy. I can speak more from the product side and maybe Connor as well on what we've been up to from conferences and stuff. But yeah, we've been pretty busy building out some more features, responding to a lot of also the changes in the market, learning more about how we can sort of protect users on, online and over the phone and all sorts of angles that we've been kind of coming at it from. Yeah, I think the biggest thing that we've been working on internally is just like more work on helping protect individual people working at crypto companies. It's been a continuing threat. And yeah, we teased the trailer for the Lights and Dark Rooms. I wonder if we can maybe show a bit of it soon, but we are sort of full steam ahead on that project as well.
So, Connor, from your side, it's the first time that you actually appear on the show. So you have been visiting a lot of conferences. Maybe fill us in about that. Well, how has it been going? How were the talks with the teams? Any updates?
Yeah, thanks. And great update, Umar. A couple other things I'll mention, like on the product side, is like we've been exploring some different areas regarding like really in-depth like staff and executive protection. A lot of our customers are getting targeted from that end, and then we're also planning to roll out more of like a dark web monitoring product to find different things like leaked credentials, addresses, phone numbers, things of that sort. So a lot of exciting things that Umar and the team are doing. So just wanted to shout that out as well. From the sales side, a lot of good things happening. We are traveling to multiple different conferences across different verticals as well. So of course, we're still sticking with the crypto trend and attending all of those in full capacity, bringing the team to there. And then also I'm attending different verticals like sports gaming, iGaming, different like sports books, betting apps, casinos, things of that sort. Also different like fintechs and banks. So we've been really like expanding the horizon at ChainPatrol. A lot of good things happening, and I think over the next couple months there'll be plenty of more good updates to share here too.
When you speak to a team, Connor, is there any like particular problem when you talk to them that you realize, hey, this really makes them click?
Yeah, I think really for ChainPatrol side, most of the bigger companies we're talking to, they already have some kind of brand protection in place, and really the big thing for us is how we can do it better. A lot of those older, more traditional companies are, I don't want to talk bad, but being outdated in some ways, and really like Umar and the team have been able to build a project here and an engine really to be able to detect more and take things down a bit faster. So you can probably hear like a bit of the sales coming out of me there, but that's like that's the short answer.
All good vibes here. I think Connor. I think we love your energy on that side. I also just want to mention and shout out that we're also participated at ETH New York, the ETH Global Hackathon this weekend. So we had a really great time in New York when the Knicks had won the basketball championship, as well as a bunch of other things going on, SpaceX IPO. And we actually ended up winning the top 10 finalists and did a project. I'd love to come back sometime to share with you guys, but if anyone's curious, you can search it up on the ETH Global website.
I think we're gonna have like a special episode next week or something to not cut it short here because it just wouldn't like cut the deal. And also got João here who was in the audience, and we want to talk about DeFi security today, João. And before we start, please give the normal listener of this show a rundown of what is Cartesi doing.
Oh, nice. Thank you so much. So, well, first things first, Cartesi is this protocol that tries to create app-specific rollups, but in a very special way. So each application would have their own rollup that uses a special virtual machine that we created called the Cartesi machine that runs Linux inside it, right? So we created this RISC-V machine that runs Linux. So the idea is that anything that runs on Linux, you would be able to run on chain. So you deploy it as a layer 2 or a layer 3 or however you want on top of any existing chain. And then you would be able to be empowered by so much, right? Having a full processor and having the whole flexibility of the, I mean, from 30 years of web development stack right there for you.
When someone hears Linux on chain, what should they understand about this? Like, what's the big deal about it?
It's really hard to understand what is Linux on chain, right? But it's basically the runtime where you run anything that was built before and of anything that will be run in the future. So I tend to say whatever application that you have, most of them, like 95% of them, run half on your device, the front end, the UI part, and the back end runs on cloud, and that's generally on a Linux server, right? So any logic, any computing logic, any business logic is probably running on this Linux server. So you can bring all the potential logic of any existing application to your Web3 application. That's the idea.
Umar, from the CTO side of things, like, do you get excited when you hear that, like, about the
Yeah.
execution environment and the Linux stuff?
Yeah, no, I'm super curious because I was thinking in my head, could you even run like a web browser on chain? You know,
Yeah.
you get like Inception where you're like browser inside a browser on chain.
So one of the things that we created that was really fun as a showcase was having the UI run on chain on the backend, so you can like record all the steps of something that you do and then prove the steps that you do to execute a functionality, right? So you basically play Doom gameplay, and then you export all the steps of that gameplay, and you actually automatically run the Doom with that with those steps specifically, so you can prove the gameplay of someone. So I don't know, someone's speed running and want to prove that they are the best Doom player ever, and anyone can verify their gameplay and see they are not a cheater or something.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Like when you think about like the originating stuff of most games, etc., it's going back to Linux, and it's very interesting that you can basically have like a proof running your stuff. João, is there any misconception that you face often when you're talking about Cartesi or people approaching you at Cartesi?
Yeah, I think most of the time people think we are a blockchain itself. It's one of the first things is like, oh, okay, so what can I do on your chain? And it's not a chain itself, it's an SDK, so you can deploy your app chain on top of other people's solutions. And then there is the expectation that everything is magical and it will run just like the EVM, right? And that because it's Linux, you don't have to understand the concepts of Web3, but the concepts of Web3 are still there. You still have to understand how consensus works. You still have to understand how finality works, so you can start to integrate it with the whole ecosystem. I think those are the most critical things that people generally don't think when they start looking at Cartesi.
Is it safe to say that the average user is not really caring where the execution layer is happening?
I think it's the average user, they won't care where it's happening, but they will care what the application does, right? And I think that's the thing. I think when we create an SDK, we are thinking about what developers will want to use to create the best solution possible, not exactly what the user is going to be using. I don't. We're reaching a point where people will stop even caring in the future if the thing is Web3 or not. They just want it to work and it to be safe in the best way possible, right? So it's just one part that we're really good at doing this execution environment, and that's what we're trying to do to provide the best we can.
All right, we're seeing protocols in DeFi getting hacked again and again. João, Umar also. It's kind of interesting to me because like since we started this show, we basically have been talking about this like every single week. There was like a big hack, a big protocol getting like hacked, etc. Even when they were audited, and this is something that I've been thinking about a lot. Like audits basically are a stamp of approval, and the user tends to feel safer if there has been an audit done on a certain protocol. But like the simple question for me or the average user or listener probably is like, why do audited protocols still get hacked? João, maybe you go first.
Yeah, sure. I think one of the first things I learned, at least on computer science university, is that it doesn't matter how much you test, it does not prove it's secure. It proves it's secure against the tests you've done, right? Specifically against those. Um, so software is always a very curious thing, and even if you get for things that are battle tested for years. With the things of AI that we've been seeing nowadays, the advancements, the capacity of exploring so much information so fast, even Linux had an issue with too much attacks, too much exploits being found, that they emitted even a notice saying like something along the lines of if your exploit was found by AI, presume that someone has already submitted it, because we're finding so many that presume that we're already doing the AI research side of it. So I think this is one of the things that have been collaborating so much for exploits being found right now. Bugs being shown everywhere, is that we're reaching a capacity that is beyond what we known so far.
Yeah, we've also talked a lot about like it being an arms race against offense and defense, basically with security. And what's your take on that, João? Like, do you think that the average team will be kind of forced to use AI in the process going forward?
I think so. I think it's natural, at least as a first barrier, because it's more accessible. But at the same time, it is something that becomes a commodity with time, right? And then what you start to need is people who know very well how to use that tool to find the exploits, to be able to audit really well using those. So I think when we find the best people that use those, and they start collaborating for the defense and not for the attack in the arms race, we get a scene that is better for us.
Connor, we got you here today, and I know you are a big sales guy, so I wanted to ask you like the question: do we rely too much on we were audited, like from a marketing perspective?
I think like from like the ChainPatrol side, like whether you've been audited or not, and like to your guys' point of the conversation too, like there's so many new threats coming out there. The AI, they're able to spin up like infinity different accounts and different bots in order to potentially interact with a user or a community member in order to potentially steal funds. Regarding like the defensive side of things, like I think it's super important, right? Because in today's world, there's no human team that can hire enough people or do things quick enough in order to keep up with the bad actors. So having some kind of like automated defense, we just can't rely on like human speed in today's world. So I think like that's a massive piece of what ChainPatrol has been doing. So yeah.
Umar, do you think that the problem with the audits basically is that we miss things during the audits, or that we change the systems afterwards? Like the audit was done, that's basically a stamp of approval of the system right now, and then everything that went afterwards may got hacked.
I think a bit of both. I wouldn't say that people are changing their protocols as much as I would have expected. Like, in terms of relative scale of like, a front end, for example, like it's changing multiple thousands, maybe hundreds of times per day in a very large organization. They're shipping multiple times per day. I think a smart contract development, for the most part, it's changing much slower. There's less complexity that is, I guess, decided after shipping. A lot of this tried to be front loaded just because of the nature of the immutability of the blockchain. People are trying to be as prepared ahead of time. I think the industry has gotten much better at that, right? Like I think there's less of these cases where there's like a very obvious bug that was missed in audit. It's usually many years later that we're seeing things, or maybe like a key compromise or something like that. I actually don't think that much of the newer bugs will be found without tool assistance. I think that's the key thing, is like auditors armed with these AI tools, auditors and operators as well, armed with AI to kind of find opportunities to exploit protocols, is kind of where things are at. There's also still a lot more to be done at the protocol level. Like there's still a lot of changes that are happening there. So I would say that's where I think a lot of the energy could or should be spent, is how can we make sure that the substrate itself is very powerful, because changing code is one thing, but changing the actual execution and stuff like that, that can like be also like a political thing that's like much harder to rally the community around.
Yeah, Zhao, I wanted to kick the question back to you. Do you think that the most DeFi hacks are basically like dev mistakes, or is this more like the symptom of the too complex systems that we're trying to build when it comes to DeFi?
I think it's a little bit of both. I don't have I don't think there's a silver bullet in there, but I think there are some mistakes that really they just pass, and at the end of the day, sometimes standing the test of time is what proves that it is secure more than anything, right? But at the same time, there is, honestly, I don't know. That's a
We asked the difficult questions here, Umar. Do you have any opinion on that? Like, is it more like a dev side of things, or is it more like because it's become too complex and we're all trying to build our own solutions and everyone's just trying to reinvent the wheel basically?
I mean, I think reinventing the wheel is not necessarily like the culprit. It's more so about how quickly people like adopt and latch on to those bad ideas and kind of don't course correct. I think at the very least, I would say that like the human iteration part of it is maybe more difficult with AI, in a sense that if you have a bad idea, you can go much further down that bad idea before you realize that there's a problem. And really, these AI tools and automation and everything that we had before, it's like it's not going to tell you that information, right? It's really just like, statistical analysis. If it's in the training data, if there's an example of someone making that mistake, then yes, it'll catch that. But if there's not, then I haven't seen anyone kind of like been like, oh, like the AI caught something that no human has ever caught or something like that, right? It might just be that the problem that you asked it is more unique, but it's really just like I don't think there's too many unique things that are happening in that regard. It's just like the amount of exposure and scale that we're exposing it to. It's like maybe for the first time it was feasible for someone who had some idea about like building a blockchain thing, that they can build it without having a dev team or without having a resource to like audit the code. And definitely there's going to be more hacks, and I think, and failures in that front, but it's kind of like self-correcting in a way. Like I feel like that's just the nature of like technology, is that like good ideas tend to get more steam. Bad ideas do get a lot more like short-term kind of like support, but in the long tail, like it's usually like we just kind of go back to like what worked. That's kind of what I found.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Something that I found trying myself to do some white hat hacking, right, just for fun, is that the process it takes, the steps the AI agents take to try to hack something, it's very historical in its nature. Like, what are the most common things that happen? Let me start by there. So it really starts to look like what a human would do trying to crack something. So yeah, ends up being very much inclined to the database and the data set where it's trained on. Though I find it really funny though as well that I don't know if you guys seen it, but there was the launch of Fable from Claude, right? And one of the things it was like Mythos, but with some restraints. So you're not using it to find exploits. So even them were like, okay, maybe we're a little scared about this. Let's not release for everyone.
Yeah, I mean there has been some drama on the timeline, I would say. Like on the release date, people were just like furious, like, hey, I can't even prompt it to audit a smart contract. And then afterwards, I mean, it basically got jailbroken. At least it's what I understood, like from an Amazon researcher or whatever. And then the U.S. government said, like, "Hey, we can't keep doing this because this might be causing some trouble, not only for us but also for everyone involved in this." So it really shows that, for me, like as not the mega technical guy, it really shows that these systems are getting really good, and we see the capacity that they already have when it comes to AI. Like if you think about like 1 year ago or maybe 2 years ago, how fast things have accelerated. Or what's your opinion on that, guys?
It's
Yeah, I
been
think
too fast.
too fast. Yeah. I would say like 1 year ago, 2 years ago, like if you asked me, oh, 100% or like 80% of your code be written like front end code or whatever with AI, I would say like no, like no. But I would nowadays I'm like, first thought is, can I prototype this with AI tools, right? That's kind of like my default. So yeah, I think that's a lot of things are flipping, things that we thought were very solid and stable are kind of like not. But there's actually a lot of people, I think it's not just about, what's old, there's old stuff and there's new stuff. I think people just like also just reflecting on what is the value of each and every part of their stack, right? Their process. That's kind of the more interesting thing to me. And there's going to be a bit of churn in that before you start to see sort of like strong opinions being formed.
Yeah, Zhao, do you get anything to add to that? Like you want to chime in as well?
No, I think we're reaching a point that it's even weird to start to build things, create things without it, right? But there's this thing that I probably can do better than it, and I'm gonna take 1 month to do it, while it's gonna take 5 minutes and it's gonna do worse than me. But maybe in the month that I take to do it, it will have developed so much that it does it in 5 minutes. So it will self-correct by the time I'll have it done. So it's really interesting how, at least on a design perspective, you can have someone working with you, together with you, to facilitate your work, because being able to have this exchange with someone while you're designing something, while you're auditing something, while you're attacking something, whatever you're doing, is really good to at least feel with yourself, yeah, I'm not going crazy, this really works, this is probably the way to go. Someone agrees with me.
Yeah, maybe for the average listener, like if you aren't that deep into building things with AI or coding with AI, you can still think about it like with the image generation, for example. You think about where we were like 1 year ago, basically, it couldn't really do text, right? And nowadays you can just like, you see AI flyers like everywhere. Like Connor can probably agree on that, like on the marketing side of things. Like if you open up anything, you see immediately, hey, this has been made with GPT, and look, everything looks basically the same, which is kind of interesting because you see like, hey, you might have some tweaks for your prompts to look unique there, right there. All right, but
and from this thing that you mentioned in the university where I do research, so many posters, they are start being just completely done with AI. It's like they throw the template there and just say make everything there, and so many students are just throwing out posters made completely with AI, and it's hard to differentiate.
on the other hand, I'm always like, why should someone that like is terrible at Photoshop, for example, right? Why should they bother trying to do something with Photoshop that still looks terrible when AI can put out like a decent thing? Yeah, you might see it's AI, but it still looks better than your Photoshop skills. So it's probably something that you can take away. I think you should get away with that, to be honest. What brands probably shouldn't get away or wouldn't get away with, and ChainPatrol is doing brand protection. One of the sides that brand protection brings is trust. And we talked a lot about like millions getting stolen in DeFi every year. We had like this April month where like everything was like exploding left and right, and millions were stolen from the protocols. But Umar, I wanted to ask you, from the brand protection or trust side of things, do you think that once like a protocol has been exploited, like the damage has been done, is there really a way to even like recover from the reputational damage, like not only from the monetary side of things but also from the reputation side?
It is very tough, I would say, generally, to uh, kind of like undo reputational damage. Like the best thing you can do as a preventative approach is just to be very, I guess, don't try to reinvent the wheel in terms of trying to do your security. I think that's the one area where I think reinventing the wheel is maybe not the best place. Like there is a lot of people who have, even in the cryptocurrency space, like going through a lot of hacks, a lot of incidents, and there's incident postmortem summaries and even uh, best practices that have been shared in the community that you can learn from and you can help avoid. Now, if something does happen, I think the biggest thing is like obviously mitigating risk, obviously reducing the impact to your community. If there's an opportunity to kind of step in and make a decision that will save funds and save end users, uh, you know, kind of ability to access their money or their rewards, like that's should be definitely prioritized. I think it's important if you want to repair reputational damage, you can't start from a place of insincerity, right? But yeah, on a less like philosophical note, I think the things that can help a lot are just showing what you're doing to fix the problem. If you are investing into security solutions, if you are investing into hires on your team that will help um, kind of catch some of these issues, set right the great frameworks for you in place. That's a great immediate step. And I think longer term, it's about, you know, showing that you're taking it seriously, that you're like not going to repeat the same mistake. You actually have changed things long term. If you use brand protection solutions, whether it's ChainPatrol or any others, what you'll find in general is that um, things change very rapidly, even on the attack surface area. You know, today it's you know attacking say Twitter or like Facebook or some social media account. Tomorrow they're like phishing and sending emails to your customers, and another day they're like bribing like customer support or whatever it might be. Like all of these things, they sound random, but they have happened in this space. So, and it's kind of like a cycle that people go through. So I think it's really important to kind of also just be aware of what's going on. But yeah, it is a tough road. I think you have to claw back that reputation, and the best thing you can do is just not lose it in the first place.
Joe, what would you say to someone when you're talking about reputation and why it matters to be like it's you're not never bulletproof, so no one is unhackable, but to do the best you can to stay safe for you and your community.
Yeah, I 100% agree with what was said. I think that it's not only about your algorithm being the best possible, your security measure being the best possible, but sometimes you gain trust by showing that you have these fail safes, right? That first of all, you have some good degree of understanding, you have some backing of people who understand from security that are saying that it's well done, it's prepared. Then of course having a emergency withdrawal mechanism, having a upgradability mechanism, having a security council that can deal with that. So even if something goes bad, you can show that you're prepared to deal with the emergency, you're prepared to deal with the situation, right? um, I think that's very important, and I think that's what will that's one of the big things that make a huge difference. Because if there is a huge problem and everyone loses everything, it's much worse than if every there is a huge problem but it is mitigated, is it is dealt with, right? Because you can trust things that you've seen that even when they go wrong, they end up going right because everyone is too secure. It's more important to be secure in the practical way than in the theoretical way. To some degree, of course, it's very important to be secure in the theoretical way as well, because well, that's what makes the whole ecosystem trustless, right?
Yeah, and like the DeFi protocols themselves, they are also like building these big financial machines where everything is just like building everything on top, and projects start to build everything like from scratch, and some just have issues with that and have like a big challenge with that. So I want to ask you, Zhao, on the Cartesi problem solving side of things, when we're talking about this Linux angle again. With the support of Linux, or basically Linux on Change, what's your take on the availability of tooling, for example, right? I think the main idea is that the tooling for Linux has been battle tested, as you said, has been like proven over the years. And what's the approach from Cartesi to that?
Yeah, precisely. So a big part of the idea was to stand in the shoulder of giants, to stand on the shoulder of people who not only knew what they were doing, but if they didn't know, the time showed that they made the right decisions. And I feel very safe using the tooling, using the languages, using the libraries, that you have such more ample, a bigger space showing that it actually works. You have probably 1 million of Web3 developers and 100 million Web2 developers. So if we're taking all of them and all of their experience and all of their time testing the things that we're using, we have a bigger margin, a smaller margin for error, and a bigger barrier protecting us there. That's one of the big reasons why we took this strategy.
Umar, do you think that these mature libraries are like a big upside for people like entering the space and trying to build something here?
Of course,
think so.
yeah. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I thought that it was a general question. Go on, Umar. My bad.
You can answer both, like, no worries.
I was gonna say, yeah, I think it does help a lot in a sense, like, you know, a lot of security. You know, when we saw the kind of the switch more towards like open source model and stuff like that, you compared like Windows versus Linux, right? How many security patches, how many security researchers, you know, get involved with submitting patches and bug reports to Linux versus Windows, just by the nature of the openness and access to the source code. People, if you don't build the tools for them, they will build the tools for themselves. And I think that's kind of really a big value proposition. If you make things more accessible, then you'll get more a wider, you know, variety of people. It also means though that you need to be a bit more robust in terms of identifying what's like useful and what's not, right? Like you with more volume, the signal to noise ratio is really hard to tame. And I see that happening across the board in general, not just in the cybersecurity kind of like crypto specific angle. It's like beyond crypto. Like most of the security teams have stayed the same size in most organizations, but the volume of requests and things that they need to do is only increased. And so there's an opportunity to, you know, leverage and stand on the shoulders of giants in certain places. You just kind of give yourself a bit of some breathing room. You start with a higher floor, and then what you need to do then is actually really understand the details of what you're doing. How it's not just about the individual pieces that you have and how secure they are, but how do they integrate well with each other. I think it's a big part of like going from the science. Like I studied computer science in school, and that was all about very much the theory, like very much what's optimal and what's possible. But then there's like the engineering part of it or the application part of it, and the gap between the two is just like time, and like I guess pain and suffering of going through a lot of on call, going through a lot of incident response, going through a lot of, you know, financial questions too, and business model viability. So I think that being in the middle between there is always a good place to be. If you're too far on the theory side, you're going to build something that's not practical. If you're too far on the operations side, you're going to build something that eventually hits a ceiling on scalability and possibility of, you know, making it secure.
Joe, do you have any simple examples where like the trusted library is safer than like some custom built stuff?
Lots of places actually there where there's this thing I said about like the ample search space that you have with more tools, but it's generally better for you to do calculations, for you to do math with existing libraries, with existing tooling. I prefer developing in Python and using quantlib than to try to make my own algorithm for a bonding curve if I'm doing a token launch, for example. There were moments on protocols where token launches went badly and price fluctuated in not the best way possible because people were not prepared. So it's generally better to use the tried the tried and true. Yeah, so bonding curves is an example of something that happened already.
I think math's libraries is in general. I don't think math changes too quickly that it needs that. Hardware might change, but even that, I think on the order of maybe 5 to 10 years.
Exactly.
Connor, I wanted to loop you in again. Do you think that like non-technical teams, do they understand the risks of like custom built stuff? Like nowadays with everything is just like vibe coded and stuff, do they understand what they are doing, what they are potentially doing with what they are doing?
Yeah, it's a funny question. Like to be completely honest, I think the short answer would be no. I think like there could be like a lot for these different teams to be learning and like also understanding like the different security risks, right? I think there's like probably a pretty big gap there for different teams to learn about. So it's an interesting point, and I'm sitting here listening and learning a lot too.
I think one thing we can mention too on that front is that like companies are encouraging their staff to use these tools, right? At least if you're working at, maybe it's changing a little bit now, but I think a lot for last 6 months ago till now, it was like, you should be using tokens, you should be using this tool, you should be, if you're doing this by hand, like you're not going to make it. So, I think there's also a bit to blame in that sense for maybe some of the shortcuts taken on sort of the learning and like how to use this versus how not to use it.
I just like came up with a question in my head when I listened to you guys talking. Like, if everyone's just building like a tiny piece of their own financial operating system, we shouldn't really be surprised if some of them break like down the road, right? Just every team is, or every protocol is building their own solution. We shouldn't be surprised if some of them just like break down the road, especially when it comes to like tooling with AI and whatnot. Okay, off-chain logic. I also have that as a topic for today, Joao, because we got to talk about the logic moving from the computation then off-chain, which brings up the question like, do users, I basically intended to ask this question when we started, like, do users really care on the execution layer, or are they just like satisfied when basically the result is exactly what they were expecting to get?
I think they will care in the sense that it won't directly translate to, okay, this is processed off chain, so this is better or this is worse, but they will care to the fact that this is still secure and it's still decentralized, it's still verifiable, it's still auditable, but it's much cheaper. I think users will care by the end of the day when they see how much they will save in gas. I think the experience will be straight up better when they realize that it does have this upside. Once again, I don't think users will be looking at the very specifics of how the application is made, but they will be looking at the very specifics of how much they spend to make an operation or to trade a token or to long or to short something,
Umar, do you have any insights from the attacker point of view? How do they see like off-chain computing?
I think they see it as an opportunity to kind of exploit or anything like that, like any change in the execution model or the system. They're always looking for opportunities. Just going back to the point earlier about the end user's perspective, I think the one danger I think with obfuscating or like simplifying is that's something that like can be exploited from a social engineering angle. So if people don't understand, why something it's usually not when something goes well, it's when something goes wrong. Or if they don't, that's when they kind of get confused. And that's sort of an opportunity for people to kind of step in and be like, hey, like, let me fix that for you. Or, hey, like, like we see that happen a lot, even with hacks and stuff like that. Like, there's a lot of fake recovery services, there's a lot of fake like support and stuff like that will take advantage of those opportunities. It's usually not just on a technical level, is what I'm trying to say. It's like moving the things off chain, I think makes a lot of sense from an operational point of view, and it's gonna help. It'll help a lot of people get involved and use the actual products. At the end of the day, if it's accessible to them and it's not super expensive, but it also means that we will kind of start to see, maybe I think, more people kind of wondering like what happens when things go wrong, like understanding like who do I speak to, who is responsible essentially at the end of the day. And before, with things kind of like on chain, it kind of like was like, well, this is the trade-off that we are willing to make because we get these guarantees. So I think we need to kind of ask the question is like, can that argument still hold if you make this change?
Yeah, Zhao, I was gonna ask the question, like, when does like the off-chain computation or logic or whatever, when does that become a trust problem?
So I think for us, for example, what we do is when we compute something off chain, it's not completely off chain. It's still running on multiple nodes, and they verify each other. And then we have a fraud-proof algorithm that will bring the correct result to everyone, right? The issue is you inherit all the security of the base layer. So if you're deploying on top of Ethereum, for example, you inherit the security of Ethereum because you're settling there. But there is this one other thing now in your threat model. There is this one other essential assumption that you have to make. That is, the fraud proof actually works. If the fraud proof works, then you're good to go. But if there's a bug in the fraud proof, then you have the issue. The same thing is true for ZK rollups, right? The algorithm has to work. If there's an issue there, then you have to start rethinking everything again. So you're basically moving your concern from one point and adding another point of possible failure. But if you trust that algorithm, then you're good to go. If you move it off chain in a more Oracle-like way, depends on how it's implemented, then you have to assume other threads, you have to take other assumptions, and your thread model changes completely. So it really depends on what you're comfortable with, and it ends up being, who do you trust? Do they make real good research? Do they have a good theoretical starting point? Do they have a good technical team that is actually capable of implementing this? Is the algorithm well tested, well audited? All of that.
I'm thinking about it like when you speak to someone in Web3, they are basically all pretty allergic to the word being centralized, right? If they hear centralized, they just like start running and never be seen again. But my question basically is the question really if something is like off chain, or are we still able to verify it? Is that not more important than it being quote unquote labeled as off chain?
So I think off chain does not mean centralized. That's the whole thing, because depending on the architecture you go to, you can still be decentralized and be off chain as a layer 2, for example. When we say we're off chain, we're saying we're not on the layer 1, we're not on the base layer, but we are still decentralized because there is still this whole shenanigan going on. The thing is, I think people are afraid of centralization because it adds a huge trust issue that is the human factor, right? And then we bring the whole point that Umar just talked about, which is there are other ways for you to attack a system. It's not only technical, right? But then it's what you prefer to trust on. I prefer to trust on the technical side. So I'm good. I feel better trusting a good fraud-proof system than a good fraud-proof algorithm than trusting a specific person that's running the thing in centralized fashion.
Umar, do you think like the verifiability part is basically one of the missing puzzle pieces for the hybrid solutions that we may have in Web3?
Yeah, I think there's to some degree it's the verifiability. The other part is, as Zhao was kind of like alluding to, it's like right now it's either or. You know, you either you either trust the math or you trust the person, right? And depending on where you grew up, how you were raised, how your mind and philosophy formed, you might be on one or the other end of the spectrum, right? Uh, I think the opportunity there with the hybrid option is you can either explain it to people as uh, worse at both, or you can say we're taking the best of both, right? And I think it's part of it is the communication of that where those trade-offs are. And for a lot of people, that might be like, okay, explain it to me, I understand it. Other people will be like, I need to see a proof every single day. I need to understand exactly that this guarantees haven't changed. And I think that's where the verifiability is really important. Is like, can someone easily access the proof and verify themselves? Can they do some form of the math themselves to that they can understand and make that comparison themselves, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that they have to do it every day, but that they can. And I think that's kind of the fundamental like trade-off that's really interesting to kind of explore. I also come at it again coming from more of a computer science point of view. It's like we studied around verifiability or like theoretically computable software. Like, can you have something that's easy to verify but hard to actually do the work uh, of actually producing that? And that's like the fundamental like problem we still need to solve: P versus NP, and what's computable in a reasonable amount of time. And I think there's something similar from like a verifiability point of view as well. There's obviously there's going to be things that are challenging in this, whether it's um, even if you explain and show people the proof, like they still will have doubts, and there's other solutions that we can use. I think it's important that there are options for people if people just want to go to the super very kind of like mathematical approach, I guess you could say, and they're willing to wait, then that's a fair trade-off for them. But I think majority of people aren't. I think majority of people just want to use and transact and get on with their business.
One cool concept I found you guys using over at Cartesi João is the Cartesi Honeypot. And when we're talking about honeypots, when we're talking to the Web3 audience, they're usually thinking like, hey, it's a coin I can buy, but I can never sell. But in your environment, this means something different. So can you explain to the listener maybe like what is the Cartesi Honeypot in simple terms?
So for us, the honeypot was a way to expose ourselves and showcase our trust in what we developed. Right. We basically deposited. There was this first version where we were testing our execution environment, where we were testing our machine that we deployed on a mainnet, and we deposited assets there for a good while, and it started piling up and accumulating, and we invited people to actually try to crack it, try to hack it, and to get their resources from there. This was deployed first under authority, so there was no fraud proof going on there, and it worked very well. And a few months later, we did the same thing for a version of our execution environment of our nodes that had the PRT, which is our fraud-proof solution, deployed there. So this time we were not testing the execution environment that was already tested. Now we were testing the fraud-proof algorithm, right? And it went very well as well. We deposited assets every now and then. People try to crack it. I myself took some took some chances. Whoever was able to actually withdraw assets from there, because it ends up working like a bridge of sorts, right? Where you deposit assets and then you have to take them back from the layer 1 to the layer 2 app chain, and this way we could prove that you wouldn't be able to bypass the fraud proof algorithm, because you have to generate a proof. It shows that our machine is good. It shows that our verification game is good, and that one honest claim will always beat the others. It stayed there for a while, and it was a cool invitation to show that it's not only theoretical. You can actually try to break it, and it's a throwback to the old ways where you do security, right? Where you say, hey, this is here and it's gonna stand the test of time. And I really dare that anyone can try to crack this thing.
It's funny because bug bounties have been scaled down a lot, at least from what I've read over the last few months. And Umar, do you think that putting like the real money in there is helping it become a better like testing ground?
I think so. I mean, it gives an incentive to fewer people to try and break the system. It kind of also just reminds me of like all the sorts of like competitions for like generating the new like hashing algorithms or cryptography algorithms. Like I remember when I found out that like the SHA algorithm was not like it was like a contest essentially to figure out who can create the best solution here. Like it gives people an incentive to kind of be creative and break each other's problems in general, or break each other's solutions in general. But yeah, I think I would have to dig a little bit more into the details of this particular project, because I haven't heard about it before to understand a little bit more. But I do think it's in general incentivizing that is really important.
Yeah, I think also it makes it pretty cool, a cool way to convey that, hey, like saying something that we are secure is one thing, but putting it on the line by putting some real funds behind that is like another challenge for everyone to like, here it is, come take it if you can. And if no one's able to take it, then that speaks for themselves, right?
Yeah. It's like the sword and the stone fairy tale. It's like anyone who's worthy can pull out the sword from the stone and become the next king of England.
Joe, we need a meme for that. Like after the space, you got a work to do. You can use AI for that.
I'm gonna do myself trying to pull Excalibur.
That's great. I wanted to end this show with your test or your video series, Joao, which is 3 levels deep, which I found really interesting because I've been doing like educational content myself, and it's pretty interesting that you kind of like have 3 different versions of explainers for different audiences. Can you tell like the audience what was the main incentive for you to do that? Because I found it like it's like a really interesting concept that I haven't seen a lot before.
So I have a very big family actually, and often they ask, what do you do for life? What do you do for a living? And I actually have to explain. When it gets to blockchain, it started to become more and more mainstream. People start to understanding, but when we go to rollups, when we go to layer 2s, then it's a mess to explain to people. So I'm very lucky to actually have a cousin who's a 10-year-old, and I often try to explain things for him because he's extremely interested in technology. He's a little genius. And then I have brothers who are I have 3 brothers. One of them is actually an engineering student, and one of them is a PhD. Right, he's a professor at university. He's doing his postdoc. He's brilliant, and I have very different levels of conversations with lots of different people. So I found myself thinking, hey, this is actually a very good sample to try to explain to different audiences, right? And the way I actually crafted the videos was talking a little bit to them, seeing what they understood, what they didn't, and figuring out an explanation that would fit for them. Of course, for the PhD, I could just go crazy. For the engineering student, it was leaned on topics that they would understand, but not so much. I couldn't just dump everything I knew. I had to be more cautious. And for the 10-year-old, it was extremely cautious, full of analogies to be able to get there and at least make sense of something. So that's how it worked.
I'm gonna leave you guys with a question, and it's for all 3 of you. And the question is, what security concepts do you wish Web3 explained better to its users? Whoever goes first can leave the room.
One I got stuck with for a little bit was the difference between a seed phrase or secret recovery phrase, private key, and there was one more thing if I forgot. But just understanding what the relationship between those two. Oh, and wallets, right? Like how can you have multiple wallets, in with one private key and so forth, right? So that took me a while to understand. I think I probably wouldn't have understood it as well until I spoke with like a chat bot, like AI chat bot. This was probably like GPT-4 or something like GPT-3. And I tried to get it to explain to me all the nuances and stuff like that. That's sort of a technical concept that you get thrown into pretty early on when you create your wallet in a lot of like an Ethereum based wallet, get an EOA. I think it's become a little bit easier now with the smart wallets and stuff like that. They tried to smooth over things for you, but yeah, that was a hard concept to understand.
João, Connor, whose hand is up?
I'm gonna steal a little bit of that and say wallets as a whole. I think having to explain to people why you can't use a regular account, why it's so hard to make an account for yourself, that's already a big thing. But also the full concept of replication, what's happening on why the verification works the way it does, why you need 2/3 of people agreeing on some computation, all of that. For regular users, people who are not used to that, it's too much information at once. It's really too much information at once.
Connor, give us your marketing take.
Yeah, no, I mean, I just have like I guess like a real life example, kind of similar to both of them, but through Uniswap, just not being as secure as I could be, and having like my whole wallet drained. So like, I think like there could be different like security awareness around that. Getting back into an account, tokens just showing up and arriving into your wallet and things of that sort. So I think like for the normal user, there's a lot to learn and a lot to be aware of, and that definitely need to be careful.
Yeah, we for sure got like a little complexity to break down to even onboard more people to the space. This was a great space. João, thank you for taking the time. Umar, Connor, thank you for being here tonight. I wish we could have talked for longer, but maybe next time. And again, thank you everyone for participating. Thank you for the insights. It was really valuable for me at least, and hope everyone learned something today. Have a great one, guys.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having me so much.